an ancient discovery is shedding light on the early church. The Megiddo mosaic dates back nearly 2,000 years, and experts believe it decorated one of the earliest Christian worship sites in Israel.
Buckle up, because a new find that stuns historians is rewriting everything we thought we knew about the early church. This mosaic, reportedly older than the Council of Nicaea, reveals jaw-dropping evidence of Jesus' divinity centuries before official doctrine. Excavated under a prison floor, it's said to be the biggest archaeological revelation since the Dead Sea Scrolls. Leveling doubts about early Christian beliefs, experts are calling it a game-changer. And you won't believe what they found hidden in its astonishing inscriptions. Oldest Christian prayer hall found. One of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries in recent times lies beneath a maximum security prison in Israel, where experts uncovered what is believed to be the oldest known Christian prayer hall. Discovered in 2005 during a check prior to expanding the Megiddo prison, a beautiful mosaic floor was found.
More than a decade ago, an incredible relic of Christian archaeology was discovered in the most unlikely of places, beneath an Israeli prison. The prison happened to be located next to the ancient ruins of Megiddo,
featuring inscriptions that mention Jesus as divine. This remarkable finding predates the Council of Nicaea, challenging those who argue that the notion of Christ's divinity was a later invention. Instead, it provides hard proof that early Christian believers honored Jesus as God Jesus Christ, long before church councils formalized doctrine. What makes this discovery stand out is the mosaic itself, which bears 3 separate inscriptions. One important inscription mentions a woman who offered the table to God Jesus Christ, suggesting that this sacred space housed celebrations of the Eucharist. Another inscription reveals a Roman centurion who supported the local Christian group, suggesting at least some degree of acceptance from the Roman administration. By locating this ancient worship site near a bustling Roman settlement, experts can see that Christians, Jews, Samaritans, and pagans coexisted more closely than many once assumed. The mosaic floor also features the classic fish symbol, which is among the earliest images used by Christians to define their faith. Because the prison building sits on top of the site, thorough excavation has proven difficult. The Israeli Antiquities Authority initially found the mosaic, then realized they would need to shift the prison to another location for deeper study. Plans to relocate the inmates took years, but the wait gives archaeologists a chance to preserve and document the earliest known Christian prayer hall. Visitors may one day explore it themselves, seeing firsthand the clues that show a powerful devotion to Jesus in the early 3rd century. The site's location, Megiddo, biblical Armageddon, also adds to the intrigue, as prophecy places the final battle between good and evil in the same area. Although many critics once argued that early followers of Jesus had simpler views of him, the inscription God Jesus Christ leaves little doubt regarding how at least some 3rd century Christians saw their Lord. This changes the typical understanding of how and when Christian beliefs developed, since the mosaic proves that Christians called Jesus God well before the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Far from being an invention pushed by imperial decree, the idea that Jesus was divine appears woven directly into the earliest fabric of Christian worship. In addition, the cultural mix surrounding Megiddo demonstrates that Roman officers, Jewish residents, Samaritans, and Christians often lived side by side, suggesting a more complex religious landscape than we might imagine. This means the persecution of Christians, though real at times, did not stop certain groups from worshiping openly. Ultimately, this remarkable site under Megiddo prison grants us a captivating window into how the first Christians gathered, prayed, and proclaimed Jesus as God. It stands as a precious piece of evidence that calls us to look deeper into the roots of the Christian faith. Inscription declaring Jesus as divine. The discovery of an inscription declaring Jesus as divine has sparked fascination among believers and skeptics alike.
Which means that early Christians weren't just whispering about Jesus' divinity in back alleyways. They were embedding it into their very own worship spaces.
Excavated in 2005 beneath Megiddo prison in Israel, this mosaic inscription explicitly names Jesus as God, challenging the belief that Christ's divinity was a later development imposed by church authorities. Instead, the find reveals a community of 3rd-century Christians who worshipped Jesus as fully divine, centuries before the Council of Nicaea formalized Christian doctrine. Archaeologists stumbled upon this treasure when they were surveying the prison site for possible historical remains prior to a planned expansion. Beneath the existing floor, they uncovered a remarkable mosaic from an early Christian prayer hall. This site yielded 3 inscriptions, the most striking being one that singles out a woman who dedicated the table of God Jesus Christ, emphasizing the idea that these worshippers viewed Jesus as God. Another inscription refers to a Roman centurion who contributed financially to the prayer house, demonstrating, at least to some extent, the acceptance, or at minimum tolerance, of this Christian community by some in the Roman military. What makes this discovery so important is the way it upends long-standing assumptions about early Christian beliefs. Until recently, skeptics argued that Jesus was only considered fully divine centuries after his crucifixion, and primarily due to decisions reached in church councils such as Nicaea, 325 AD. However, the phrase God Jesus Christ, found in the mosaic, suggests that these beliefs were practiced and taught as early as 230 AD. Moreover, Megiddo's mixed faith environment, evidence shows Samaritans, Jews, pagan Romans, and Christians overlapping, suggests a rich context in which ideas of Christ's divinity intersected with diverse cultural influences. Further adding to this site's intrigue is its proximity to the ancient city of Megiddo, a place with deep biblical significance, long associated with fortifications, battles, and end-times prophecy, Armageddon. Though today it is a quiet area, its history is bursting with drama, from King Solomon's fortification to Roman military presence. Finding a Christian prayer hall here underscores the spiritual importance of this region. It's remarkable that this early house of worship, complete with vivid mosaics and inscriptions, remains so well preserved under a modern prison. Excavators had to work meticulously, often delayed by security protocols, to study and document the fragile remains. From a theological standpoint, the inscription declaring Jesus as divine is of particular interest. It provides material evidence that, decades before Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, and over a century before Nicaea, some Christian communities were already openly worshiping Christ as God. This fuels debate over how quickly and widely the concept of Christ's divinity spread in early Christianity. From a historical perspective, the mosaic reveals fascinating details about social and religious diversity in the Roman world. Romans, Jews, Samaritans, and early Christians could live side by side, defying the old assumption that Roman officials universally persecuted believers. Multi-faith coexistence. Multi-faith coexistence refers to different religious groups living together in harmony, even when their beliefs vary. In the case of the ancient site uncovered beneath Megiddo prison, archaeologists found traces of Christians, Jews, Samaritans, and pagans sharing common ground. This unique situation shows that these communities may have worked side by side, forging relationships based on daily life rather than issues of worship. When experts began their excavation, they were amazed to discover not just an early Christian prayer hall, but also evidence of nearby Jewish and Samaritan villages. While many assume religious groups in the past could not coexist peacefully, this site in Israel suggests something more nuanced took place. For instance, the presence of a Roman centurion who donated to the Christian community signals at least a partial acceptance of this new faith by a member of the Roman military. Rather than driving out or punishing the Christians, it appears some Roman officials tolerated, or even supported, their gatherings. Such openness challenges the image of constant religious strife in the ancient world. While clashes did occur, these findings remind us that ordinary life might have been more cooperative than we often imagine. People often needed to trade goods, access water, and secure farmland, all of which required working together. This daily reality could have fostered practical relationships, sparing groups from continuous conflict. The mosaic discovered under the prison even displays Christian symbols like the fish, which would have been easily recognized by other believers, yet it did not seem to create upheaval among non-Christian neighbors. The town's layout further underscores this shared environment. Megiddo once housed a mix of households from different faiths. Some mention Jewish synagogues, others refer to Samaritan sites, with Christian gatherings taking place in private homes. While theological debates might have existed, everyday concerns such as food, shelter, and safety could outweigh religious differences. The archaeological record here causes one to wonder how many local friendships and business connections might have formed across faith lines. Moreover, this multi-faith setting shows that persecution of some Christian groups, though real in certain periods, did not always mean total banishment or fear everywhere. Evidence from Megiddo suggests there were places where Christians felt secure enough to construct a dedicated prayer area, possibly receiving monetary help from local donors. Such support would have been impossible without some level of tolerance. Significance of the fish symbol. The humble fish symbol has played a surprisingly major role in Christian history, acting as a quiet yet powerful sign of faith. In many early Christian settings, including the ancient prayer hall discovered beneath Israel's Megiddo prison, we see fish designs that point to a vibrant community of believers. While it may appear simple, this symbol carries deep meaning, a reminder of the earliest disciples, a statement of core beliefs, and an emblem of shared identity. First, the fish symbol recalls the story of Jesus calling Peter and Andrew to leave their nets and become fishers of men. In the Gospel of Matthew, these brothers worked as fishermen along the Sea of Galilee, living ordinary lives until Jesus asked them to join his mission. The image of the fish thus came to represent both the practical side of daily work and the spiritual task of inviting others to follow Jesus. For the early church, placing a fish symbol in worship spaces showed that they viewed themselves as participants in Christ's calling, charged with spreading the good news. Second, many scholars note that the Greek word for fish, ichthys, forms an acronym for Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. Written in Greek letters, each character stood for a name or title of Jesus, capturing the heart of Christian belief in a short and clear phrase. At a time when Christians faced varied levels of acceptance and even suspicion, this simple fish served as a way to profess faith without drawing extra attention. By carving or drawing a fish, believers could quietly unite around who they believed Jesus was, all without needing lengthy creeds or public statements. Third, as seen at the Megiddo site, the fish symbol was woven into bright mosaics, etched on walls, or drawn in hidden spots. Its presence signaled that this was a place where Christians gathered long before large churches became common. In the prayer hall below Megiddo prison, the fish design lived alongside inscriptions calling Jesus God, proving that worshippers held a high view of Christ's divinity. By combining a fish symbol with these words, they linked their faith with the message that Jesus was more than a teacher. He was viewed as Lord. Fourth, the fish symbol helped foster unity across diverse groups of believers. In Megiddo, nearby communities included Jews, Samaritans, pagans, and even Roman military officials. Despite such differences, a shared sign like the fish helped early Christians find each other and worship together. It was a universal way to express a new identity that transcended background, language, or social standing. Finally, the fish symbol stands as a testament to faith that endures through trials. Though persecution of Christians varied over centuries, there were times when openly declaring one's devotion to Jesus brought real danger. Even then, the fish endured as a sign of hope and solidarity. By quietly marking doorways, tiles, or meeting spots, believers could say, "We belong to Christ," without necessarily shouting it in places where doing so was unsafe. To this day, the fish symbol remains familiar worldwide, spotted on car bumpers, church signs, and personal jewelry as a brief yet deeply moving confession of trust in Jesus' message. Its meaning has shifted from secret code to public display, but the heart behind it remains the same. Across centuries, from the mosaic floors of an ancient prayer hall to the modern world, the fish reminds us of calling, conviction, and community, core elements that shaped the Christian story from the very start. Challenges in excavation. Excavating an ancient site sounds thrilling, but it comes with a host of real-world hurdles. The uncovering of a Christian prayer hall beneath Israel's Megiddo prison perfectly shows how challenging it can be for archaeologists to do their work effectively. Far from a simple dig in open fields, this project forced specialists to navigate red tape, tight security, and unique logistical realities that most historical explorers never face. The first, and biggest challenge, involved the Megiddo prison itself. Being a maximum security facility, it held inmates who could not simply be relocated on a whim. Archaeologists had to secure permission from prison administrators, arrange safe routes through restricted areas, and schedule each stage of work around prison routines. Guards needed to be on high alert throughout the project, which meant everyone's movements were carefully planned. This slowed excavation because even basic tasks like moving equipment required prison clearance. Even after gaining permission to begin, researchers found their access severely limited. Excavation had to happen in brief, closely monitored intervals. Any extended digging risked shifting prison infrastructure or interfering with daily operations. Adding to the difficulty, some prisoners were invited to help, but that too required supervision and detailed planning. As a result, progress happened in small bursts. It also meant that archaeologists had shorter windows to examine each layer of soil, often leaving unstudied items hidden beneath. Relocation plans. One possible solution to many of these challenges was relocating the prison to another area. However, shifting hundreds of inmates isn't simple, nor is building a new facility. This meant political maneuvering and funding had to be squared away before any move was possible. During the time it took to plan relocation, the excavation paused or proceeded at a snail's pace. While the plan was often discussed, it took years before archaeologists felt hopeful about conducting a full-scale dig without prison bars and security staff hovering close by. Finally, with the prison's strict rules, everything from lighting to tool usage had to be carefully supervised. Even something routine, like running water pumps to clear out any groundwater, involved strict guidelines, background checks, and written approvals. Meanwhile, experts working within these constraints had to balance scientific rigor with practical realities. Maintaining clarity on excavation records while juggling security briefings and administrative documents became a daily juggling act. All these hurdles demonstrate that archaeology isn't just about uncovering ancient walls or mosaics. It's also about solving modern-day puzzles related to politics, safety, and logistics. The Megiddo prison excavation shows how unforeseen barriers, like discovering an ancient treasure under a maximum security setting, can turn a straightforward dig into a complex challenge. Yet these very hurdles can make the eventual findings even more meaningful, showing that uncovering the past sometimes hinges as much on navigating present-day realities as it does on research and skill. Stone spheres in Costa Rica. Scattered across the Diquís Delta in southern Costa Rica are these giant stone spheres. Some have been hanging around since around 600 years after Christ. They're called las bolas, or the balls, by locals, and they were crafted by an ancient pre-Columbian civilization. Most of them are made from gabbro, a rock formed from molten magma.
There are over 300 petrospheres all throughout Costa Rica that are known about anyways. Now the majority of those are made out of gabbro, which is a type of magma rock.
And experts think these folks carved the spheres into perfect shapes using smaller stones as tools. Pretty impressive, right? Now here's where it gets more interesting. Nobody really knows what these spheres were for. Some say they were used to map the stars, while others think they marked important places.
The theory of the stone balls is that they were somehow used as star maps.
The truth? It's a total mystery. When the Chibchan people disappeared after the Spanish conquest, they took the secret of these spheres with them. Anthropologist John W. Hoops said it best in 2016. This is one historical mystery we might never solve, and this may be because we were never supposed to know. Could they really have been ancient star maps or just fancy decorations? Stick around, because the next list might just blow your mind. Antikythera mechanism. Imagine stumbling upon a real-life ancient gadget that would make even Indiana Jones jealous. That's the Antikythera mechanism for you.
Now, when they found that ancient Greek computer thing, what is that called?
The Antikythera mechanism.
Yes.
Yeah.
A bronze, gear-filled wonder pulled from a 2,000 years old Greek shipwreck near the island of Antikythera. This shoebox-sized relic is like an ancient Swiss watch, packed with interlocking gears and mysterious symbols etched all over its surface. Initially, folks thought it was just a fancy navigational tool, like an old-school GPS for sailors, but as archaeologists dug deeper, they realized it was actually a super intricate astronomical calendar. This thing could predict celestial events like eclipses and track the lunar calendar with mind-blowing precision.
You then have a crank that you use to rotate to a particular date that then puts everything in the position where they're going to be in the sky. So therefore, you have a device that is calculating both space and time.
In fact, it's so advanced that nothing else like it shows up for another 1,000 years, and the plot thickens. Recent studies suggest that the Antikythera mechanism might have had a lunar calendar with 354 holes, aligning with the Greek lunar year, rather than the 365 days solar calendar as previously thought. Cleopatra's tomb. Cleopatra VII was the last ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which ran Egypt between 305 and 30 years before Christ. She's famous for her sharp mind, legendary beauty, and dramatic love life. She even had kids with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. But there's one big mystery about her that still confuses historians. Where was she buried? Cleopatra and Mark Antony both took their own lives after losing to Octavian at the Battle of Actium in 31 years before Christ.
Under the command of Marcus Vipsanius, Agrippa has won a decisive victory over Queen Cleopatra and her slave, Mark Antony.
They were buried together in a tomb described by Plutarch, around the years 45 to 120 after Christ. As lofty and beautiful and close to a temple for the goddess Isis. Sounds pretty fancy, right? But here's the catch. No one knows where this tomb is.
No one knows what happens to her after she dies, or where she's buried.
And even if someone does find it, there's a good chance it could be empty. Grave robbers were super active in ancient times, so archaeologists think the treasure might already be long gone. Qin Shi Huang's tomb. In 1974, farmers in China's Shanxi province made a huge discovery, a life-size terracotta army built for Emperor Qin Shi Huang, 259 years before Christ to 210 years before Christ.
This is the terracotta army. 8,000 warriors buried over 2,000 years ago. One of the greatest wonders of the world.
These incredible clay figures were made to protect China's first emperor in the afterlife.
Originally in ancient China, like 3,000 years ago, they believed the afterlife.
But while we know a lot about the army, what's still a mystery is where Qin Shi Huang himself is buried, or what treasures might be hidden in his tomb. A pyramid-shaped mausoleum is located about a mile away from the terracotta army, but no one has entered it yet. This tomb is said to be the most lavish ever built in China, with ancient texts describing an underground palace and even a kingdom around it. The tomb has a network of caves and a fancy drainage system, but there's a problem. The tomb contains dangerous levels of mercury, so archaeologists aren't sure when or if they'll have the technology to safely dig it up. What treasures lie inside? That remains a mystery. The next list is actually more than a mystery, and it will blow your mind. Shroud of Turin. Perhaps no archaeological discovery sparks more debate than the mysterious Shroud of Turin, which many people believe to be the burial cloth of Jesus Christ.
I think we can be certain that this is the burial wrapping of Jesus.
This long piece of twill fabric has traces of blood and a dark imprint that looks like a man's body. The Catholic Church officially recorded the shroud's existence in the year 1353 when it appeared in a church in Lirey, France. But the legend of the shroud goes all the way back to the years 30 or 33. According to the story, the cloth was first moved from Judea, now southern Palestine, to Edessa, Turkey, and later to Constantinople, now called Istanbul. After Crusaders sacked Constantinople in the year 1204, the shroud was moved to Athens, Greece, where it stayed until around 1225. In the 1980s, researchers finally got their hands on the cloth and used radiocarbon dating to figure out its true age. They concluded that the shroud was actually created between the years 1260 and 1390. In other words, the scientists believed the cloth was probably a medieval fake.
pretty obvious fake from the Middle Ages.
But some critics argue that the scientists may have dated the newer parts of the shroud that were stitched in centuries after Jesus' death, which could explain why the shroud seems newer than it really is. Voynich manuscript. One of the most famous books of the 20th century was one that no one could understand. The Voynich manuscript, found by an antique bookseller in 1912, is a 250-page book written in a strange alphabet and filled with odd illustrations, from female nudes to medicinal plants and zodiac signs.
What you might not picture is a book filled with whimsical illustrations of nude women in bathtubs. Bathtubs everywhere. These, along with drawings of star-shaped flowers and wild green vines, they're all kind of tucked inside the pages. The mysterious book has been divided into sections by historians.
Currently kept at Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, this mysterious book is about 600 years old and is believed to have been written in Central Europe. Some scholars think it's just a Renaissance-era prank, full of gibberish, but others argue it's written in a language we don't know yet. A few even believe the manuscript hides a secret code waiting to be cracked. In 2014, Stephen Bax, a professor of applied linguistics at the University of Bedfordshire in England, claimed he had decoded 14 characters from the book.
And in particular, I tried to find patterns in the script linked with pictures, particular pictures, which might give us a clue to proper names in the script.
Bax suggests that the manuscript is likely a nature-focused treatise written in a Near Eastern or Asian language. King Tut's death. Few archaeological mysteries excite people as much as the story of the Egyptian boy Pharaoh Tutankhamun. In 1922, British Egyptologist Howard Carter discovered King Tut's tomb, and ever since, rumors of a pharaoh's curse that killed those who entered the tomb have spread. But the real mysteries surrounding King Tut's tomb are even more fascinating than any curse. Archaeologists believe King Tut died suddenly, possibly from an infection or injuries from a chariot accident. This could explain why his mummy was in such poor condition when it was found. It seems that King Tut's body may have caught fire after his tomb was sealed and his body was mummified. Experts think the linen wrappings, soaked in flammable embalming oils, may have reacted with the air's oxygen and caused a chain reaction, setting the body on fire and cooking it at about 390 degrees Fahrenheit. This strange event could be due to a rushed burial that led to a botched embalming. This hurried burial raises another question. It's possible that King Tut's tomb was originally meant for someone else, and other undiscovered mummies could be hidden in there too. What mysteries can beat this? Stay tuned because we've got more in store. The Rosetta Stone. In 1799, during Napoleon's Egyptian campaign, French soldiers stumbled upon a stone slab near Rosetta, Egypt. This discovery, known as the Rosetta Stone, was inscribed with a decree issued in 196 years before the Common Era during the reign of Ptolemy V Epiphanes. The decree was written in 3 scripts: Greek, Demotic, and Egyptian hieroglyphs.
It was incredibly difficult, and frustratingly, the translations aren't exact. There are differences between each of the 3 texts here, but once one piece was cracked, there was a way in.
The presence of these 3 languages on the stone provided the key to deciphering Egyptian hieroglyphs, which had been a mystery for centuries. Jean-François Champollion, a French scholar, successfully cracked the code in the 1820s by comparing the Greek text with the hieroglyphs. Now housed in the British Museum, it remains a symbol of linguistic and historical breakthroughs and continues to draw millions of visitors each year. The Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is a gold-encrusted wooden chest that, according to the Book of Exodus, contains the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments. In ancient times, this sacred box was kept in the First Temple, a Jewish place of worship in Jerusalem. But the First Temple was destroyed in 587 before Christ by a Babylonian army led by King Nebuchadnezzar II, according to the Hebrew Bible. The fate of the Ark remains unknown, and since its disappearance, many individuals, both real and fictional, have searched for it. So far, no one has actually found the holy relic, except for Indiana Jones, of course. Some ancient reports suggest that the Ark was taken to Babylon after Nebuchadnezzar's conquest of the city. Others believe that it was buried somewhere in Jerusalem, or that it was destroyed along with the First Temple. Modern reports hint that the Ark resides in a monastery in Ethiopia. A recently translated ancient Hebrew text also suggests that the Ark of the Covenant will reveal itself, but not until the day of the coming of the Messiah, son of David. Nazca lines. The Nazca lines in Peru are a collection of massive geoglyphs etched into the desert floor, depicting everything from animals to geometric patterns. Created by the Nazca culture between 500 before Common Era and 500 Common Era, these designs are best appreciated from the air, revealing their true scale and how complicated they are. For years, archaeologists have pondered their purpose. Some suggest they were astronomical calendars, aligning with celestial events. Others believe they served as pathways for religious pilgrimages, guiding people to sacred sites. Recent discoveries have added new layers to this mystery. Just last year, researchers using artificial intelligence identified over 300 new geoglyphs, including humanoid figures and animals like killer whales. This suggests the Nazca lines were more extensive than previously thought, possibly indicating a more complicated cultural significance. Despite these advancements, the true purpose of the Nazca lines is still strange.
It's like your local water utility map on a one-to-one scale. This is a complex but effective way of recording knowledge onto the Earth for later generations to use.
Were they astronomical observatories, religious pathways, or something else entirely? The debate continues. The last discovery on this list of archaeological mysteries is definitely not what you might expect.